I will now introduce Mary Ellen Bench. Mary Ellen serves as counsel with Denton's Municipal Planning Group, where she advises on a broad range of public and private sector clients on governance, municipal law, development infrastructure, and related matters. Throughout her career, clients and colleagues alike have relied on Mary Ellen's exceptional skill set and professional excellence to lead numerous infrastructure and development projects, provide significant input on governance matters and municipal legislative reform, and to advise on many municipal corporate development and finance matters. I have been fortunate with Mary Ellen's mentorship over the last several years. With more than 30 years experience in the municipal public service, Mary Ellen has held various leadership roles in legal departments, including as city solicitor for the city of Mississauga before we were so fortunate to have her join us. She is also an annual contributor to the Thomson Reuters O'Brien's Encyclopedia of Forms publication, providing legal insight from a smart cities perspective. I welcome Mary Ellen and Bernie and Witamy Christian from our Warsaw office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see everybody here. Our topic today is focused on urban energy alternatives. It follows nicely on the past presentation dealing with transit because, again, the focus on climate change, the focus on alternative fuels is big around the world. In the GTA, there are a lot of measures going on that deal with district energy and other projects, and our speakers today have some very insightful perspectives on what is happening in other places. Bernie Roth practices Canadian energy, regulatory, and environmental law in the Calgary office of Denton's. He regularly appears before the Canadian Energy Regulator, as well as provincial energy and utility regulators, to obtain approvals for energy facilities and to set tolls and tariffs for the provision of energy-related services. He also appears before federal and provincial courts on energy-related appeals and judicial review. Bernie has some great insights on what is happening out west, in particular in the city of Calgary. Once we hear from Bernie, we're going to hear from Christian Schnell, who is a Denton's partner and a German and Polish advocate advising investors on renewable energy power and heat investments in Central Europe for the last 25 years, focusing on transactions that include finance, and he is a senior expert at the Jagiellonian Institute. He is author of a few dozen energy market reports, including the first energy sector coupling report on the Polish market in 2020. So first, Bernie, we're going to hear from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. I often get in trouble before energy regulatory tribunals and courts. They're reporters for talking too fast, but I'm going to use that talent now to play a little bit of catch up. So Calgary perspective on Calgary energy use in the city of Calgary. So Calgary just declared last year at about this time a climate emergency. So what did they declare? That now they said now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Calgary declares a climate emergency. And what does that mean? The City of Calgary will race to zero by adopting best practices and leveraging capital investment with the goal of becoming a global center of excellence in climate adaptation, mitigation, and energy transformation. So in order to do that, they came up with a plan. The plan was just issued in June of this year. It's out there. It's a pathway to 2050, and it also has midpoint milestones to 2030. I'm always interested in, when I see a plan or anything else that I'm thinking of buying, what does it cost? So the cost of the plan is a total cumulative investment of $87.89 billion. That's fairly exact, they came up with. But the investment doesn't necessarily have that much cost associated with it. The net cost of the implementation will range between $5.58 billion and $27.4 billion, depending on what the cost of energy is. So, well, how do we pay for that? And to put that into context, I look for putting costs into perspective. And the very small slide here for those of you to see, but this is a article from the daily oil bulletin, and it tells us that Alberta this year will take in from non-renewable natural resource revenue alone. This is essentially oil royalties, a little bit of gas royalties, a bit of forestry, but mainly driven by oil royalties, of $28.1 billion this year alone. So the entire cost of Calgary's climate plan would be more than paid out for on the high end of the range on our natural resource, non-renewable resource revenue alone in 1 year. This doesn't even include federal taxes or municipal taxes. So you'd have to put billions on top of that, and that's one year of revenue. So Calgary's assessing that it seems like a big number, but in the context of the economics of energy in Alberta, it's quite an achievable number. So how's Calgary going to do it in this plan? And there's a lot of detail in the plan. Much of the smartness in the plan and things we're talking about today, which are very interesting, is how to reduce energy consumption through municipal planning and building better land planning, better planning of buildings to reduce the amount of energy that the city consumes. Very interesting, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about what I find interesting in the area I practice in is the power, where you're going to get it from. Where are you going to get that energy? And specifically, we're going to have to rely heavily on renewables. So what do we have for renewables in the context of Calgary? Well, the sun shines on Calgary. And you only have to go to Gordon Lightfoot's Alberta Bound to know, oh, the prairie lights are burning bright. And this is a Natural Resources Canada map of solar productivity for photovoltaic potential. This is a whole year's potential. If you look around in southern Alberta, Calgary sits right across that. So the darker it is, the better. You can look down there. Red is the most power you'll generate. The power in the southern prairies and in southern Alberta is as good as virtually anywhere in North America. Texas, places in New Mexico, a little bit in California will be in the red, but it's a sweet spot and certainly the most intense in Calgary. In Europe, it'd be comparable with Spain and Italy. So remarkably, Calgary has a lot of solar potential. So how do we use that solar potential? So we use it through a community. This is a solar design community just south of Calgary called Drake Landing. It's a smaller subdivision. It's kind of a pilot program. It has solar collectors. So you're seeing all of the solar on top of the double bay garages there. And that is collecting thermal energy from the sun and sticking it underground so it's available in the winter. So it's essentially you cook up the heat, you bury it in the ground, and that's how you're storing energy. And then in the winter, when it's cold now, you're pulling that energy out. They have some PV, electrical solar panels on the roofs, and that's what's running the pumping equipment. So this community is virtually uses no energy other than solar energy for heating purposes and hot water purposes throughout the year. So it's a pilot program. It's a kind of a concept of district heating, and it's using a geothermal heat, but it's creating the geothermal heat by pumping the heat in the ground in the summer and pulling it out in the winter. So that's an innovative idea. And how much more do we do this? We'll definitely do more district heating, and Christian will talk about different ways of doing that. But that is one of the things we're doing. The other thing is we're generating a lot of electricity, and this is the roof of my house. So in 2017, there were a lot of money being given for solar panels, so I put a lot of them on top of my house. So there's 32 panels there, and they generate a lot of electricity. So that's a little app I have on my phone, tells me how much electricity daily, hourly, minutely, and this is a yearly printout. So I'm generating on my house a little over 8,000 kilowatts a year. That's the annual consumption of an average home in Calgary. So those panels you saw there put out enough to cover my electricity needs for the year. It's not steady. In winter, it's slower, so I generate more in the summer and put it out. But that is my annual solar potential in my house. So that Calgary has that going for it. The other thing Calgary has going not in the city, but in the surrounding area is the wind blows. And again, Gordon Lightfoot knows this. The Chinook wind is a moving in, and it moves in harder. This is another one of those maps that shows, again from NRCan, that shows wind potential and wind energy potential. This map is particular. It's not an annual. This is a winter map, and it's showing that right there in the eastern slopes of the Rockies, right around Calgary, we have as much wind power as you have in coastal areas. That's red. That's as high as it gets. The beauty of that is most coastal areas, you're in remote locations, you don't get the power. The power here is right next to the most of the population in Alberta. So we have a lot of solar power. What do we do with it? We talked a lot about transit. We ride with the wind. The Calgary City Transit, the Calgary Light Rail System has run since 2001. They essentially backed the original wind development in the province of Alberta through contracts to get it going. So since 2001, transit has run completely on wind energy. It's the only LRT system in North America, or at least it was at the time, to be doing this. Now the entire city of Calgary is all run off of renewable. So Calgary's demand, not just for transit, but all Calgary's demand is met by renewable energy. So the challenges going forward are going to be on heat. I showed you the power for my house at 8,000 kilowatt hours a year. Well, I use, on average, this house in Calgary uses 10 gigajoules of natural gas power or natural gas heat to heat your home. That's 4 times the energy of that 8,000 kilowatt hours. So somehow you have to figure out how to replace that immense amount of heating. You can do a solar community like they did in Drake's Landing down in Okotoks, just south of Calgary, if you go with district heating. But another opportunity that we will be looking at is district heating. And that is what Christian Snell is going to talk about coming up. So I'll turn it back to you, Mary Ellen.
Thank you, Bernie, because, well, the good thing is actually I haven't been fully able to follow your presentation, but the good thing is actually I've seen it before. So I'm ready to comment on it. In Europe, as we already discussed, there is actually right now we see a strong tendency to generally go into new investments when it comes to so-called sector coupling, which is a nice word. It doesn't mean anything else than electrification of heat energy and transport energy. Well, transport energy, you all know in Canada better as we Europeans do, because we have more, I think, electric cars than we have in Europe. But when it comes to power to heat, well, that's something where I think for the time being, Europe is trying to make a point. Actually, in the northern part of Europe, in Scandinavian countries and but as well in UK or in Germany, and more in Poland, we see that heat pumps develop very well. Heat pumps means nothing else than you use actually electrical power to source heat. And this works quite well, and we see as well the power demand increasing due to that fact. And of course, heat pump makes sense when the energy is actually renewable, because as all with these intermittent energies, meaning wind farms and solar farms, heat pump makes perfectly sense, because it just collects power, which is not so easy to store, and then you produce heat, and heat is by far easier to store than power. And we see right now that not only for individual households, individual homes, we see that heat pumps are developing well, but as well in district heating systems. The largest heat pump which we have installed in a district heating system is a 40 megawatt heat pump, which is installed in Vienna, in Austria, to source the high temperature heat grids. But we see that in many outskirts of more and more cities, in the suburbs, you actually see heat pump with microgrids developing well. In case there's a, let's say, good geothermal sourcing, then of course the heat pump works perfectly because you have already, let's say, a certain temperature. You don't have to really start from zero in a certain way. When you don't have geothermal available or some other waste heat, then of course you can go for the air heat pumps, and this as well works well. You know that we currently in Europe have a big crisis when it comes to gas supply, mainly due to the war in Ukraine and the ban of Russian gas. And this, of course, is an additional driver to just leave conventional energy away and to move fully to renewables. On the other hand, there's as well legislation coming from the European Union, which on the one hand not only bans conventional fuels, but meaning CO2 emission certificates, but as well bans methane emissions. And this is of course with natural gas, a tricky one, because although the CO2 footprint is by far lower than with coal generation, the methane emissions when it comes to upstream gas is of course quite substantial, and on the short term we know that methane is even more harming the greenhouse effect, or providing to the greenhouse effect than CO2 does. So that's generally the environment what we have in Europe, and as I told you, we see many investments in these district heating, heat pump, mini microgrid systems. In Scandinavia, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, in UK, that means in Northern Europe, because there, of course, the heat demand is higher. On the other hand, we see that as well the renewable energy sourcing is perfect, mainly due to the wind energy, less when it comes to solar radiation. And this additionally drives the whole heat pump story, and it becomes right now already more competitive when it comes to commercial than gas firing and gas boilers.
Thank you.